I want to share something embarrassing that's happened to me, and I'd love to know if you can relate. So there have been times I'm in a conversation with somebody that I don't know very well, and suddenly it's like something kicks on inside of me, and all of a sudden I am just like vomiting out my most personal, private, painful experiences of my life. And then sadly, as it's happening, as I'm like spewing out things that are super private, there'd be a part of me saying like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And yet I couldn't stop. And then after the conversation would end in whatever awkward way it would end, I wound up with a shame spiral that would cause me to want to be in bed for days. Let me know if you can resonate with this. And if so, you're going to want to watch this video because we're going to talk about oversharing. We're going to talk about why we do it, how it's a sign of unhealed trauma, how it's a sign of the flight trauma response in specific, and more importantly, how we can break free from this trauma response. For those that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, which means I help people work through unhealed past trauma by working directly with their nervous system. I'm also the founder of the School of Transformation, which is where I help people cognitively and somatically do the inner work to heal from unhealed trauma in a group setting. So if either of those resources seem like they would be something that would be helpful for you, make sure to check out my links above. Sharing with acquaintances or strangers is actually a sign of compartmentalization. And the reason we compartmentalize things or we put things behind closed doors is usually a defense mechanism where something's happening in our life that doesn't make sense. Maybe there's cognitive dissonance. Maybe there's an overwhelm of strong emotions or a lack of safety that our nervous system isn't equipped to handle, especially when we're young. And so it takes the information and puts it behind a closed door. But while that's helpful in childhood, right? We can't handle this. This is too much. It's too overwhelming. It's too confusing. We'll just not look at it for a little while. It's also not effective because it's kind of like closing the door on a fire that you don't want to deal with right now. You may not see it for a moment, but it's burning up and making more of a problem with time. Well, that's kind of what happens with unhealed trauma that's being compartmentalized. So let's talk about the flight trauma response. Humor me for a moment and just imagine that you're walking through the woods and suddenly you come face to face with a bear. Automatically, your brain is going to go into survival mode, which is going to activate fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Now, normally, in this case, it's not going to go into fight because you're going to be like, I can't win. So it might kick on the flight response, which is all about escape. It's like your brain is saying, get me out of here. And it's not just like this mental thing that happens that's like, oh, I need to run away. No, your flight response activates your sympathetic nervous system, and there is a biology that goes along with that. Your body gets flooded with hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which leads to physiological changes like your heart rate increasing, your breathing changes, you begin chest breathing, you have muscle tension, your pupils dilate. In other words, your body is preparing to quickly escape the threat that it's seeing with the bear. The flight response in that scenario is super understandable. But guess what? If you're in a social situation where maybe there's a fear of rejection, maybe you were taught in childhood that you're not safe to be authentic, that you're going to get shamed, abandoned if you are your true self, then that fear will kick on the same fear that you would feel if you were face to face with a bear, and the same biology that would come up in your physiology comes up when you're in a social situation as well. Maybe if you were face to face with a bear, you would physically run away. But in the social situation, what happens when you have that overactivated flight response is that you try to emotionally escape by oversharing. And it could be motivated by one of two things. It could be that your brain's like, if I can just share everything, then I can somehow control the situation and possibly avoid rejection. Or it could be that you are seeking safety through connection. In other words, those painful beliefs of, I'm going to be rejected, I'm going to be abandoned, I'm not safe to be me, I'm less than, all those painful beliefs are kicking on, which make your body feel unsafe. And then if you've never learned how to establish safety within, you're going to go outside of yourself to try to establish safety. And sometimes oversharing is that way of doing that. And I really want to clarify that no one chooses to overshare. No one says, oh, I'm not safe, therefore I'm going to just open up the can of worms. Nobody does that consciously. It's the body feels unsafe, and then your survival brain sees all the discomfort in your body and chooses that trauma response of trying to connect with somebody else to try to find some kind of safety within. And so it's almost like the flight and the fawn response merge when we're oversharing. And here's where the layer of trauma comes in. Because if in childhood you were attacked for being you, you were shamed for your feelings, you were punished for normal things, maybe you had to constantly justify your feelings to an angry parent, maybe you learned that if you shared enough personal information, then maybe one of your parents or family members might feel sorry for you and then stay close. Regardless, over time, your brain hardwires this behavior and it becomes a way to feel safe in relationships. In my case, I learned over time the two downsides of oversharing. Either they ruin healthy relationships because healthy relationships just don't connect that way. They build slowly over time. Trust is built through your lived experiences with the other person. It's not taking your most private things and flinging them onto the person off the bat. That's not how trust is built. And with healthy relationships, that actually scares people away. And then the other downside of oversharing is not only does it push healthy people away, but it is a magnet to unhealthy people. Unhealthy people love when you overshare because they learn your wounds and your fears without having to do much work to get them out of you. And the oversharing also shows them that you have unhealed and unresolved trauma from the past. And toxic people, they love wounded people because it's easier to hook them in the love bombing stage. Because there's so many painful wounds that a person believes about themselves with unhealed trauma, they can just love bomb and look and put up a facade of interest and love and like, and then someone with unhealed trauma falls faster. So it can suck you into unhealthy relationships that will only perpetuate the trauma you endured in childhood. Okay, so we understand more about oversharing and how it's a trauma response. Let's shift into how to break free of it. And the first step has to do with being with the activation in your body. In other words, it's not just about saying, okay, from now on, I'm making the goal or setting the goal to never overshare again. I mean, that's a great goal. It really is. But if I don't understand how the biology of trauma kicks on, that would also be like me, who I'm terrified of coming face to face with a bear. But that would be like me saying, I'm not going to have adrenaline and cortisol running through my body if I see a bear. I am not going to have my body change my breath, my heart rate. Nope, it's not going to happen. No, I have no conscious control over that biological response. And that's what we have to realize when it comes to our flight response, whether it gets kicked on for whatever reason. It's not about learning something and saying, oh, okay, I'm just going to turn that off now. No, that activation is going to kick on in your body without your conscious consent. And so the first step is about learning how to be with that activation in your body without getting flung into a trauma response. And it's about building capacity. Step number 2 is about being able to uncover the unconscious programs that are driving that trauma response. So, for example, you may need to ask yourself, why am I wanting to share at those moments? What is the emotion that triggers me to do that? What is the meaning that triggers me to do that? Our meanings are deep within our subconscious mind. And while we might make the conscious choice to change an external behavior, if our meanings are not updated, then the old ways of handling stress and fears are going to kick on automatically. Now, I'm going to be honest, that's a lot easier said than done. And so I want to talk about how helpful somatic experiencing is when you're learning to work through unhealed trauma from the past. The reality is healing starts in the body, because trauma, it's not just stored in your mind. It lives in your nervous system. And that's why, like I said before, simply deciding to stop oversharing while being a great goal often doesn't work. When we include somatic experiencing as part of our process in healing, what we're doing is we're working directly with what's stored and stuck in the body. We're working with that activation. We're learning how to build capacity to be with it. Let me tell you, when I was first healing, I was in a chronic freeze response, like 24/7. And until I could be with the emotion of fear or feeling unsafe without, in my case, going into the freeze response, I stayed stuck. I would just feel the emotion. My nervous system would kick on the freeze response. I had no control over it in the beginning. Well, somatic experiencing, to me, it's like nervous system gym. It helps you to build the capacity to be with the emotions, with the activation that comes on in the body that kicks on the trauma response. When we can be with that, and we have space between that emotion and the trauma response, we can start rewiring a different reaction. And so if you're stuck oversharing, that's what you want to learn how to do, to be with the beliefs and the emotions that are underneath that flight response and the behavior of oversharing. So you have a different reaction to when you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable or nervous. And when you have a different reaction, you can start creating real connections with people. As you're working with the nervous system, instead of oversharing to feel safe, you create safety in the body. And you don't have to overshare to feel safe because you already feel safe. And so you can share in a healthy way and allow relationships to be reciprocal and to grow with time. So as a reminder, if you found this information to be helpful, make sure you like and subscribe. And again, if you struggle to apply what I teach on my channel, don't forget that I meet live every week on Zoom with survivors from all over the world that are doing the inner healing work together. So if this is something that you feel might be helpful for you, come join me live in the School of Transformation.